I would like to welcome everybody to tonight's event. My name is Orlando Valle. I'm currently the board president for the Michelson Museum of Art. So it is my pleasure this year to serve alongside several other people in the room and with Denora to bring wonderful events to Marshall like this. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward and introduce our panelists. So first we have Dr. Victoria, Victoria Hennessy Cummins. And she is an AMP Junior Chair of History Emirate at Austin College in Sherman, Texas. She's earned a master's and a PhD from Tulum University and was a Fulbright Scholar to Spain and Mexico. Her current research dealing with Texas regional artists grew out of her long-standing interest in the influence of artists in the United States of the Mexican muralist movement of the 1920s to the 1950s. She has authored and co-authored a number of articles on early Texas artists, including 3 regarding aspects of Don Brown's career. She co-edited with Light T. Cummins the award-winning anthology, Making the Unknown Known, Women in the Early Texas Art in 2024. Her current project is a book-length biography, Don Brown Catalytic, artist, journalist, and educator. Thank you for joining us today. All right, our other panelist is Michael C. Smith. He's the managing partner of Chef Stone LP, the Marshall office, concentrating on complex commercial and patent litigation in federal court. One of the Eastern Districts of Texas' most seasoned practitioners, he's appeared as counsel of record on over 1,000 cases before the court and chaired the local Rules Advisory Committee from 2000 to 2009. Since 2008, he has, since 1998, he edited the O'Connor's Federal Ruling, Civil Trial Handbook, and maintains the national recognized Eastern District of Texas Federal Court Practice, Texas IP Law, and Texas Business Courts Blog. In 2012, Texas lawyers named him one of Texas' top-notch intellectual property lawyers. Michael Smith holds a JD and an LLM in litigation management from Baylor University, a master's in public affairs from UT Austin LBJ School, a master's in World War II studies from Arizona State University, and a bachelor's from East Texas State University. He clerked for Judge Sam B. Hall, Jr. of the Eastern District of Texas. He's a Marshall native and has served 3 terms as Marshall City Commissioner and currently serves as president for the Harrison County Historical Museum. He is also the sole inventor of 2 U.S. patents and has authored 3 books. He and his wife, former Harrison County Treasurer Jamie Marie Nolan, have 3 sons, Garrison 26 and twins Collins and Parker 23. Please welcome.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We are going to start with, this will be a panel discussion. In the beginning, I just have questions for them, and we have a time. We're trying to be respectful of everybody's time. I know some of you have some book club after or other activities happening, so we'll try to keep it in an hour, but at the end, we will be asking questions from the audience for them. And also, if you have a story or something that you want to share, please let's share it with everyone at the end of the presentation. Welcome to you both. We appreciate you being here. I think Michael won a case today. Yes.
Our jury came back an hour ago, and our client is very happy. So our jury came back over in the federal courthouse about an hour and a half ago, and our client's happy, so we're happy.
As you can see, the beautiful art of Max Cole. We have in this beautiful room. I'm going to start with you, Michael. Before we go into the works of Max Cole, can you give us a brief portrait of who he was? Where he was born, where did he train, where did he live, and how did he end up in Marshall?
I have the advantage of our Harrison County Historical Museum maintains, I knew who Max Cole was because I grew up here, But when Denora told me she wanted me to talk about Max, I went to our museum's collections and said, what can you tell me about Max? And they pulled out all this great information about him, about his background. So that's where I'm getting. It's not from me, it's from our museum's resources. So that's a great thing for our community. Max Cole was born in 1906 in Lansing, Michigan. His father died right around that time, so just a year later, the family moved to Victoria, Texas, and then they moved to Marshall in 1918. So he grew up, he spent his, what we would call junior high and high school years here, grew up in Marshall, but his family was so poor that due to the hard times, he did not graduate from high school. Now his mother said he could draw a recognizable horse when he was 5, and if she gave him a pencil and tablet, he'd be busy for hours. The first grade, and this is familiar because I got in trouble for this too, except I was drawing little bombers on the side of my books. He got in trouble in first grade. He got paddled for putting cartoons on the borders of his read cards. And I have distinct memories of doing the same thing on mine where I paint stuff in it. So I can understand. As far as training as an artist, we'll get into his work experience later, but there are a couple of pieces of training that I think are worth pointing out. He took a correspondence course in art directed by Mr. E.L. Keller. He got good grades, and a lot of that shows up in his artwork. Then, his key mentor in the 1940s, he took art lessons from H.B. Wright, who was director of the Louisiana State Museum. And Wright told him, according to his widow wrote down that Wright told him, Cole, you can do more to murder the anatomy of a horse than any artist I'd ever known. He loved Western art, but it took him some training to be able to draw a recognizable horse. And he studied under Mr. Wright until Wright finally told him, Cole, you don't need my help anymore. So he was very much self-taught, not through education, not through a school setting, but through going out there and doing correspondence courses, finding people he could learn from. So he knew this is what he wanted to do. So even though it wasn't exactly his job early on, he was out there finding people that could make him better.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. And like you said, we're going to dive in a little bit more on his commercial work with the railroad. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, when he got out of high school, he didn't graduate from high school, but when it came time for him to start working, he did what a lot of young people did around that time, and he went over and worked at the T&P railroad shops here a few blocks down the street. And the job he had was as a painter and a sign painter. And he loved painting, anything like that, but that was the only job he could get, so he was known as Jocko at the railroad. And his real break was, he said he was doing pictures every time he had a spare moment. And his real break was in 1940 when the supervisor said, we've gotten this mural and it's horizontal and we want to go into a dining car, so I want you to cut off the sides and continue the top part up and put it in a dining car. So he goes and does that, and they said, his supervisor said, we will find you a job as an artist at the railroad. We will find work for you to do. And we know that he painted 14 murals for T&P dining cars. I have not yet seen any of the records of that, but as I think we'll talk about later, there's a connection between the people he worked with doing work on and around dining cars and the church work that he did later on. But that's what he did initially, was working at the T&P Railroad.
He was really a very prolific artist. You know, when he came to East Texas, there were two different landscapes, right? He had the Michigan landscape and then the one that drew him here. Do you think how the new environment affected him in his way of work?
Well, I think we're a lot bigger than Michigan. I shouldn't say that because actually I've been to Michigan in the summer and it's beautiful, but he clearly, you can look around you and see how much he enjoyed painting the landscapes. And what he was known for was Western scenes, blue bonnets, Caddo Lake, horses, Western things, biblical scenes, Holy Land scenes. So he very much enjoyed painting the outdoors. And if you look at some of the paintings, he has a great deal of skill depicting the natural natural world. He might not be the first guy you'd reach out to do a painting of a horse, but if you want a painting of trees or landscapes or a Caddo Lake or a historical scene, which we'll talk about a little more later, that he was very good at that.
So he wore many hats, right? He was a commercial artist, he was also a community figure, we call him a documentarian, a historian as well.
Yes, although I don't know enough about him to know how much of we see, because the way we know him, I mean, ever since I've been around our museum, that's going on 30 years, you would walk in and you would see these paintings. So we all associate Max with historical paintings. I don't know that we know how much of that was what Max wanted to do and how much of that was people commissioning him, Mr. Hackney commissioning him to do the collection we have here in the bank. He certainly became the visual historian of the history of Harrison County, whoever's idea it was. He's the one that we think of. When you grow up in Marshall, when I was in 7th grade, your social studies class, Ms. Williamson, would take you to the museum and all the different places, and that's where these pictures were, and that's the image we all grew up with in our head about the history of where we came from.
And that's the Harrison County Historical Museum, and we are so grateful for them to collaborate with us and allowing us to have this beautiful art here today to show to you. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Don Brown. We're going to do a mix of both of them. Don Brown, can you tell us a little bit about his life and where he came from?
Okay. Let me know if I'm too loud. My indoor voice is a teaching voice. And even though I'm retired, I can still project, so. I hope you can hear me in the back. Yeah, I heard you. Okay. Don Brown was actually born in Taylor, Texas. Not Taylor County, but Taylor, which is down by Georgetown. And his parents met there. The Adaires and the Browns had both moved there from elsewhere. Parents met, they married in 1898, and a year later, here comes their first boy, Don. When he was fairly young, his father got a job working for the Brown Cracker Company of Dallas. No known relationship to the Don Brown family. His father was a salesman, and his territory was East Texas. So they moved to Marshall. Marshall made sense in terms of the railroad connections. It also made sense because there were already Adaires here, including the Adair that was running one of the newspapers, and that was Don's mother, Octavia's family, the Adaires, and that's his middle name, Donnell Adair Brown, named for them. When he was in about junior high, his father got transferred to the main office in Dallas. And so Don finished junior high and did his first 2 years of high school in Dallas, and that's when he had his first formal art training. His mother said that from the minute he could hold a pencil, he was drawing, and that at the age of 8, he announced to the family that he was going to be an artist. And he never did change his mind for the rest of his life. When he was living in Oak Cliff in Dallas, he had his first studies with a Dallas artist, Gail Bolton. Also with J.B. Martin, who ran the art gallery at Fair Park. This is, pre-World War I period. And also with John Knott, who was the 40-year cartoonist for the Dallas Morning News. Knott was important because although he was a cartoonist, he was born in Austria. And when it came time to study art, his parents sent him back to Munich, and he got a classical German art training. And he was able to impart some of that to Don Brown, who he encouraged. His junior and senior year in high school, they moved back to Marshall. His father's position in the company changed again, and he finished high school here. While he was in high school, he worked summers. He worked at a box factory. He helped build Highway 80 to save money to go to the Art Institute school in Chicago, because Hale Bolton had convinced him that if you want to be an artist, you've got to get the training. And so the summer between his junior and senior year, he went up to Chicago for 2 months. He had saved enough for the tuition. And he washed dishes in order to support himself. And my favorite is he became a supernumerary in the Chicago Civic Opera. You know, those boys carrying the spears in the background of Aida. He was one of those. But at the end of the summer, he came back. After high school, he joined the Army for World War I. Never did make it into combat, but he did make it to France. And in the 3 months between when the war ended and they were shipped back in early 1919, he got to go to Paris. And he got to see the Louvre, and he got to see all the museums, and he knew he wanted to go back. So he came back home to Marshall. He enrolled at what was then called the College of Marshall for a semester, did well, I've seen his report card, and then he quit, got a newspaper job. First in Shreveport and then back here in Marshall. The whole point was to earn enough money to go to the Art Students League in New York. And by the end of 1921, he was able to go to New York. There he studied with John Sloan, Kenneth Hayes Miller, Boardman Robinson, and Thomas Hart Benton, who became a lifelong friend. By 1923, working for newspapers in New York, he saved up enough money to go to Paris. And he studied Cubism with André Lot at the Académie Grand Chaumière. He also studied at the Académie Julienne, and he studied at the Louvre. And he supported himself by writing for English language newspapers. He has a journalism background that goes all the way back to when he was 20 years old. Comes back to the United States in 1926, paints here for a couple of years, goes back to Shreveport to earn money to go to New York, to earn money to go to Paris again, studies in Paris for another 3 years, and finally comes home for good to Marshall, which he always considered his hometown, in 1932.
Thank you very much. I mean, he had a remarkable dual life. I mean, a journalist, a painter. How do you think his work as a writer influenced on his paintings?
I would almost say it's the opposite. He considered himself, he painted and he wrote what he saw. He considered both of those things documenting the natural world, which is what he was the most interested in doing. Yes, he wrote newspaper columns on all sorts of things because that's what made him money. But when he was at Centenary and he was writing what he was interested in, an awful lot of it was about the natural world, the flora and fauna, the people of Cattle Lake, the people of the Red River, the people of the Bayou country of northwest Louisiana and northeast Texas, because that's what he wanted to document. And he saw himself as doing it visually and also as a wordsmith. He saw it as part of the same thing.
Well, he was Central Texas and then went to Paris and New York City and he came back to
Because
Marshall.
he had to. And he says this, he actually says this. He says, I was in Paris. He loved Paris. It was the lost generation Paris. You could drink, there was jazz, you could live cheaply because the exchange rate was ridiculously beneficial to people with dollars. And he loved it. It was fantastic. But he didn't want to paint Paris. He wanted to study, because if you wanted to be a serious artist, everybody knew you went to Paris, and he did that. But he said, I went to Paris and I learned all the modern art techniques, and I realized I wanted to go back to Cattle Lake. And I wanted to paint Cattle Lake. I wanted to paint the birds and the fish and the people that I grew up with, the people that I knew and the people that I loved. And so he comes home in 1926 because he wants to be where he is inspired. And this is where he was inspired.
Great. So he was deeply connected to the Dallas Line.
Well connected, yeah.
Well connected. Could you talk to us a little bit about that? And he was in favor for what is called American regionalism.
He was a well, everyone said he was a regionalist. He never used that term for himself, but he was okay with it. Artists don't particularly like to be categorized, and he was sort of against that. But certainly, if you see regionalism in Texas and Louisiana, his interests, his themes, absolutely fit in with that. I don't know that he fits in with American scene, which is more political and tends to be more urban. And if there's one thing that Don Brown wasn't particularly interested in, it was urban. He didn't mind living it, but he didn't particularly want to paint it. So yes, I would say he's a regionalist. And by the way, both Texas regionalists considered him a Texas regionalist, and Louisiana considered him a Louisiana regionalist. And he was active in both groups. From the time he went to Centenary in 1934, he was heavily active in both groups.
We'll claim him in Texas. And going back to Mexico, and both artists truly had a love for the place that they lived in and their surroundings. I know Cole was commissioned to do the Marshall National Bank booklet that you have in here that talks about the history of how the county was created. Could you talk to us a little bit about those images?
Yes, this is you think about things that you do that have an echo far into the future. This commissioning by Mr. Hackney of Marshall National Bank in the early 1960s. The bank was getting ready to celebrate its 75th anniversary in 1964. And he had the idea, I assume, of commissioning Max to do a series of paintings of the history of Harrison County and display them in the bank. So they did a series of 19 paintings, which is the paintings around you. They displayed them in the bank, I think in the month of September, for about a month in the bank. And then he did one other thing, which is why we know as much as we do. He also had a little booklet printed up, and of course the painting of the bank is on the cover, which I don't mind because my office is 2 doors down. The 100 block of East Austin goes back to our family ways. But anyway, they do a book here, and this copy is still in the museum, where they picked out important things in the history of Harrison County, how Marshall became county seat of Harrison, and it's got the guys getting drunk under the tree, and because that's where they'd stash the whiskey, and they got so tipsy they just said, okay, forget it, this will be the county seat, we're too tired to go anywhere else. And that's the story, and the reason I know the story is because I was taught the story growing up by someone standing in front of the Max Cole painting at the courthouse, because that's where these have been. So this is a way that the stories of the history of our community have been documented in a visual way where you can, somebody has said these are the important things that we want to mark. We want to do it through art, and we display that art, and I think that's valuable in our community too. Obviously our community cares about art. Well, this was an example of a local leader bringing together an artist and that artist's talent and topics that would be of interest to people around, and not only creating the artwork, but doing it in such a way that it's continuing to tell the story almost over 75 years, I'm not a math student, I'm not very good at math, but anyway, a long time ago. So for a long time, we've had Max's paintings since the early 60s to talk about the history of Harrison County, and that's one of the reasons why we identify him with all the historical sites.
And he also did some Cadillac paintings.
Yes.
Some portraits. There's a really famous portrait that he did of a local singer.
Mm-hmm. He did commissions. He did a lot of different things: etchings, watercolors, oils, portraits, nature paintings. I get the feeling that he really enjoyed nature more than anything else. In part, I love looking at the painting of the bank because it's all dirt, mud streets, and you can see, you can tell he enjoyed doing that and showing what puddles on a mud street look like and wagon tracks, and he enjoyed setting those scenes, and that's one of the things that I enjoy about, because there's often the dirt roads in front of Wyalusing up here, the path going up, and then there's some scene happening there. He really seemed to enjoy putting nature in, and I particularly enjoy looking at his trees in all of these. He loves to put the pine trees and the oaks and give us something interesting to see in the background.
I think often of the Lady Stevens, which is right behind you, which was a very tragic story of what happened in Cadillac, and the way he described the way he painted it, is so interesting to me. The colors and how he had to really paint a really hard time in Cadillac.
Yeah. And again, it'd be interesting to think about how much of our memory of the burning of the Lady Stevens is because of that painting. Because you have that image that everybody recognizes. I know what the kind of boat was like. I know generally what it looked like, and I have this image in my head because of that. That's one reason why I'm so glad that they did that. And somebody said these are the things we want to put a stake in the ground so that we remember.
So from your perspective, You've seen some of his body of work. Is there one single painting that is your favorite, or do you think it, or a genre that represents?
I don't even have to say it's my favorite because Max told us it's his favorite. When I was reading an interview that he did for the railroad in 1959, he said, and let me quote him, he said the work that gave him the greatest satisfaction, and what he said probably always will be my most satisfying work, was a mural he made for a church here in Marshall, Miles Memorial Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. Well, I don't know that we knew about that, and when I got on and I checked and realized, wait a minute, that church, I wonder where that mural is. Well, you go on the internet, boom, there's the picture, and this is it over here on the left. It was originally a 6-foot by 18-foot mural, and he was later asked to increase the size to 8 foot by 28 feet. And the church's website shows the whole mural, which is where this comes from, there in the sanctuary. I'm Catholic, so I don't know if you call it the altar, but it's behind the altar. And you can tell he loved that scene. He loved doing Holy Land scenes, biblical scenes, but you could tell how much he enjoyed. You've got the dirt path, you've got the animals, you've got Jesus, you've got trees. Things look a little suspiciously like East Texas to me. But I mean, I love knowing now that was his favorite, that was the most satisfying thing he did, this enormous mural. Because remember, he was painting murals in these railroad cars. And I now know, I didn't know this until 15 minutes ago when I was visiting with members of the congregation, that said that there were people that were working in those dining cars that went to their church while Max was painting the dining cars. So I wonder if that's where it came from. They said, hey, we're building a church. Would you come out and look at doing some of the sanctuary? This was clearly something that was very important to him. Maybe because of the subject matter, I tend to think it's because it gave him an opportunity to really go broad with a landscape and do the water, do the clouds, do the sky, do the trees, do the dirt, do the grass. He really seemed to enjoy that.
I had the opportunity to go to the church yesterday, and the mural is intact and it's beautiful. Seeing it in person truly really gets to your heart, and I'm so grateful for that part of the congregation that is here with us tonight. And thank you for sharing the stories. And then when we finish with the panel, we'll appreciate more stories if you have them. Okay, Dr. Cummins, Don Brown really had a love for Cattle Lake. You think about cattle and you think about the cattle Indians and all the history that is behind that. What do you think it drew him? I mean, it's a beautiful lake, but what drew him to that subject?
Some of it's nostalgia. When he was a boy, living in Marshall, the family first took their buggy out, I assume because there were no roads, and then later when there were roads, drove their Model T Ford out to Cattle Lake, and that would be their weekend activity. They'd go out, they'd hunt, they'd fish, they'd bring some cans of vegetables and potatoes, they'd make a mulligan stew, campfire, stories, family memories for himself and his parents and his brothers. So that's his beginning of his love for Cattle Lake. But he loved the natural world, and Cattle Lake was so primitive. And I mean, that is not that's good, okay? Well, somebody should say primitive, or oh, it's backwards. No, unspoiled. And he loved the unspoiled nature of Cattle Lake. He loved the fact, he used to say, you could go out and you could get beyond the sounds of the modern world. Now remember, his modern world is the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but even still. And he said, you're there, and all you might hear is the splash of a fish, or an alligator, or you'd see a bird going by, and you'd think, what was it like 2,000 or 3,000 years ago? He's fascinated by that, by the natural world, the unspoiled world. And he was interested, he wasn't interested in the built environment, he was interested in the natural environment. And Cattle Lake, and it's not just Cattle Lake, it's also the Bayou Country on both sides of, the line between Louisiana and Texas, the Red River. He he made boats, he built boats, he had 3 different boats. He sailed 2 of them down the Mississippi River, all the way to Barataria in the Gulf of Mexico. And he wrote about this because he was a journalist and he saw it describing it for the papers as part of also, and he illustrated all of his own newspaper work. He saw that as part of his engagement with the natural world, just like making a drawing or painting a watercolor and turning something into a print. He saw that all as part of, I hate to call it his mission, but his way of engaging.
And he was also a muralist, right? There is one mural still in Marshall.
I visited it today, yes. Do you pronounce it Bolivar Street? Yeah. Well, I was a Latin Americanist, so New Orleans has a statue of Simon Bolivar that was given to them by Venezuela. It's on Simon Bolivar Street, and they call it Simon Bolivar. So I sort of guessed. But anyway, he did one, and in fact, it's his last mural, and it's almost his last work, because it was done in 1958, and he died in May of 1958. And it's the entire waiting room of what was then a clinic, and is still today a doctor's office, and it's still there in situ, and it's in pretty good shape for being like 69 years old.
Is that Dr. Turner's office? Is that Dr. Turner's office?
No, I think it's Dr. Logan.
Well, I mean, was it 50 years ago?
Yeah, it has been various things, but it has always been a medical office.
Yeah.
And it's still there, and still people sitting in the waiting room with this lovely mural on 3 sides of the waiting room. He did some others. Most of the ones, really, they're all gone. He did one at Marshall High School. That's gone. He did one at Centenary. They painted that one over while he was still on the faculty. He didn't have to have that. He did one at a grocery store in Vivian. We looked. It's not there. He did one for S&L Marine in Shreveport. That's my favorite one. He traded it for 2 outboard engines for his last house. But that one is not extant either. So yeah, he didn't consider himself a muralist, but he didn't mind doing murals, and he was pretty good at it.
Well, that means that location is one that has paintings by both of our subjects tonight, because it was also the subject of the painting of the Missouri Capitol, which was on that site before that building by Max Cole.
Another connection. Very good, very good.
You can kind of see, if you look at both murals, how different they show the landscape, because like Michael said, there's a little bit of East Texas on that religious mural on the top. So going back to the same question that I asked Michael, what do you think, if you look at his body of work, to you, what is one of his most representative mural or painting?
Well, I love that mural. I love that mural. If it were up to me, I would like sneak in every day like I had an appointment and sit there. I really like that one. I really like Song and Dance, which is, I also like the print, Dark Rhapsody. It's a man playing guitar and a woman dancing with probably Cattle Lake. It's water and cypresses in the background. It's one of his most famous paintings. I really like Little David and Ruth, which are, he didn't do a lot of portraiture, but he was good at it. He had studied, when he was at the Art Institute of Chicago, he studied portraiture. And he could do it, he drew beautifully. He could do portraits, he just mostly was interested in landscape. I mean, that's just what spoke to him, but his portraits are excellent. So yeah, I like those. Anything with a cypress tree. I'm easy to please with Tom.
And you can see, like, they're side to side, right? You can see both cypress trees from Cattle Lake, from both artists, and they are just so different. And that tells us about the magic of art and how do we truly see things differently. And we are so lucky to have both artists represented here tonight to show us their point of view. And the historians that we're talking about. Let's go back to Max Cole. And, you know, he functioned or as like he said, a historian, but we don't know if that's how he will call himself. But he was doing this beautiful paintings of what was happening at the time or what he thought it happened back in the day. Do you really think
larger scale, I don't think he saw himself as a storyteller. Now, on the individual paintings he did, I mean, you look at the one of Peter Whetstone being shot there, there's a story he decided to tell. It's not Peter Whetstone. It's, yeah, okay, I'm trying to remember. Sometimes I get Whetstone mixed up. Well, let's go with Barrymore, because that one's a little more fun. That's a terrible thing to say. But he, in that case, he does have a story. He has a story that everybody knows, and he's trying to figure out a way to show. The Barrymore murder happened not at the Ginocchio Hotel. It was before it was built. It was at the White House cafeteria, which was run by Ginocchio at the time. And he puts together, how am I going to tell the story on a particular thing that he's going to do? But I don't think he enjoyed that. If I had to guess, I bet the story distracted him a little bit. He'd rather just have a landscape. Okay, you want me to put a 3-story hotel on it? I can do that. You want me to do the railroad yards? I can do that. But I don't get the impression he really liked telling a story, like a scene.
You think Western scenes might?
Right, Western scenes would be one, and again, because that's basically a landscape with recognizable things in it that you want to show the character of the landscape. And I think he enjoyed that. I don't know that showing historical action scenes, to me, those are the ones that I'm not sure he enjoyed those as much. I get the impression when you're showing the French settlers with the Caddo Indians, and you're showing the Great Madrid earthquake, where he's got a chance. There may be some people in it, there may be some action taking place, but it's kind of still an excuse to do landscapes. Now, why these artists enjoy landscapes so much, I don't know, but they certainly seem to. And that really seems to be the heart of the picture that they are more interested in.
Absolutely. Well, going to that, from your point of view, if you were to paint East Texas today, as how we are, what do you think you will be interested to document or to paint in Harrison County?
Well, of course, he should have painted more of the old courthouse, so he should start there. But if he went around Harrison County today, I think he would still spend a lot of time at Caddo Lake. He might. I really don't see him painting a lot of things differently, unless somebody said, I want you to do some more historic scenes. I want to point out some historic locations that maybe we haven't recognized in the past in these pictures. These pictures tell part of the story of our county, but not all of the story, and he might want to go back and tell different parts of the story, but I still think he'd want to spend most of his time out at Caddo Lake if he had a choice, and then you'd have to talk him into going out and saying, no, there's a great piece of scenery over here that maybe you weren't aware of or looked differently back in those days.
You told a story of you driving by. You remember where his?
I do. I grew up when I was young. Our family lived out on Duncan Edition, and I remember driving by. What I now know was his studio all the time. I never went in, but it was where I guess Juicy's or McNabb is now. But I remember clearly going by it. I just never knew that's what it was. I mean, well, no, I knew what it was, but I didn't know really what Max Cole was about back then.
It's not fun how life is. Now you're becoming a Max Cole expert.
Yep.
And his great granddaughter is here.
Granddaughter. Step up here just a second. I did grow up spending, I spent a long time in my house, which you're talking about, which is now Juicy's parking lot. Very interesting that it seemed so big as a child, and now it's like nothing. There's hardly anything there. But I did grow up in the shop and the house. I was the youngest of 5. I had 4 siblings. But I was so young, I didn't know how amazing, obviously, he was. for to paint horses and landscapes. Spent a lot of time in New Mexico, anywhere where there was desert, and you could see for miles and miles and miles. He loved to do that. But I'm going to tell you, one of my favorite paintings, and also the bronze of it, is he did love to storytell, and this is why. He had a mama bear and a baby bear on a log, and on the other end was a skunk. Yes, and it was titled Initiation. There's so many stories I can tell you, we don't have time today. But his sense of humor was incredible, and he loved McDonald's French fries. And one of my memories was going across the street, we would still walk across the street to McDonald's. I would get a cheeseburger and French fries, and he would eat half of my money. He loved McDonald's French fries. So that's one story I have. 4 stories if you would like to talk. I would love to see his mural. I did not know that existed. It's beautiful. Looks just like something you would love to do. And it does look like Texas. But my family just weren't, we really didn't know all of these existed. We got to come to know him. And my 4 siblings and my dad, who is still alive, he is 91. Max's son, he's in assisted living in Longview. But he got to come and see this, and it meant the world to him to see his dad honored like this. It was just incredible. It was just, yeah, he was just in awe of this. So we knew him, like I said, as a Western artist for the most part, and just seeing everything that he was capable of. He was incredible. I didn't get this side of it. I am a singer and a piano player, but I didn't. Sorry to say. So, there you go. Let's talk a little bit.
So we're going to close talking a little bit about John Brown. Can you talk to us a little bit about his academic side as a teacher and helping with the art department at St. Mary?
One of the things people don't understand about Don Brown is that when he took that job in 1934, he had 1 semester of college education. Art was not taught at the college and university level, except teachers' colleges training art teachers, and then the College of Industrial Arts in Denton was a woman's school, and women needed industrial arts, right? So so you couldn't really major in art anywhere. And so what you did is what Don Brown did. You went off to St. Louis, or you went off to Chicago, or you went off to New York, and then you went off to Paris. And he had wonderful art credentials, but he only had 1 semester at the College of Marshall. So what they did is, first he had to work out, right? But they loved him. I mean, he built the art department. Basically, they had taught art for a couple of years. He created enough interest in the students to hire another person and create an art department and a major. But they couldn't give him tenure because he didn't have a degree. So what he did is he started taking courses at seminary. And they gave him credit for his art training, and he majored in English because he couldn't really major in art because he was the art department. That was going to work. So he didn't get his bachelor's degree until 1943. He got a BA in English, which actually, when you know his journalism and writing interest, makes perfect sense as his choice. And once he did that, they could tenure him and give him a sabbatical. And so, which is what they wanted to do and promote him. So, how was he as a teacher? He taught in the French atelier style. In other words, Americans come in with a syllabus, and first you draw shapes, and then you shape them in, and sort of like John. I don't know if you're old. Remember John Leahy learned to draw on PBS? I grew up with that, and that's sort of that systematic American approach. The French approach in the atelier, the workshop, is you come in, they give you a task to do. It could be a life drawing, it could be a plaster mold, whatever you're doing, and then you do your best, and they come in and they critique it, not to tell you how terrible you are, but to tell you what you can do to improve. Well, that's how he taught his classes at St. Mary. He was a popular teacher. Apparently, the co-eds loved him because he was an easy D. If you came to class and did all the work, you didn't have to have any talent. But the good students liked him because the atelier system worked for them. He was eccentric and a bit flamboyant. He used to run around in Bermuda shorts and plaid shirts, and he had this one polka dot tie he wore to class. You had to wear a tie to class, right, if you're teaching. And he had a maroon and white polka dot tie. Apparently he wore it for like 10 years in a row. He used a shillelagh, he wore a beret, he had a goatee, you know, all these affectations. But nobody cared because he was kind, he was supportive, he was accepting of students, and both the sort of casual students looking for a decent grade by showing up, and the ones that really needed to learn, they both seemed to like him. And as we got into the 50s, because he always remained, he was only interested in painting his area. He hated abstract expressionism. He really rejected, he knew how to do it. He could do cubism, he could do Dada, he could do surreal, he could do it all, but that's not what he wanted. He believed in representational art, so that marginalized him with his best students in the 50s because they wanted to learn how to do abstract expressionism. But that didn't mean they didn't like him as a person or accept him as a teacher. He was a very popular teacher.
Thank you so much for saying that. Is there any additional comments or any more information you want to share?
You didn't ask me what would he be painting.
Oh my goodness, it's right here. Yes.
All right. I can absolutely assure you he would be in a boat out on Cattle Lake, away, as far away from the noise as he could get, sketching. Okay? I bet my last nickel. And what would appall him is those riverboat casinos and the cofferdams at Shreveport, ruining. He loved the Red River. For 15 years he had a boat on the Red River. And he was an ecologist. He was really a conservationist. When they built it, I lived in Sherman, so I know all this. They built Lake Texoma during World War II, the Army Corps of Engineers. It's a flood control lake on the Red River. He was opposed to that. He was deeply opposed to that because he said it's going to change. We would say the ecology of the river. He just said the natural world, and he was totally opposed to that. So what goes on the Red River in Shreveport, Bossier City would not be something he would be happy with.
Thank you so much. I see that both artists really love what they did, and they both created work for themselves with their talent. And they were also really love East Texas. So thank you so much. Thank you to you both for being here with us tonight, and